I don't know when we're going to exactly recover or if we're going to go back down and make new lows. But one thing that I do think, by looking at some previous price action in the past, I kind of think that over the next one or two candles that we see, I expect this gap here to basically be filled. Yo guys, how's it going? So that was a clip from my last update, which was on the 4th. And since then, eerily, we've been making candles look very similar to that update. And also, we absolutely filled the gap like we thought that we'd fill it within a couple of days. Now, not much has happened over the last couple of days, but at the same time, a lot has happened. We had some wild trading days, even though we're basically back to square one. The only other thing I would talk about with the S&P 500 is that we have some consolidation going on here, and a break to the downside followed by a quick recovery is kind of looking like we'd finally are ready for our next leg to the upside. So that's my observation from the S&P 500. And if you guys get any value from this content, don't forget to put a smash on the like button. It really helps this content. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing to this channel. I'd really appreciate it. And in addition, if you're into cryptocurrencies, you can also take advantage of a $250 Bitcoin bonus. These are the requirements of how much you deposit and how much you get paid out. I'm a partner with BlockFi now, and I love the 8.6% APY they pay on stable coins that I just put there, basically coins that track the US dollar. So without any further ado, let's look at Tesla stock here. Some interesting things happening with Tesla stock. Did we break down to the downside today? I would say hold the brakes a little bit, hold the phone, not quite yet. Keep in mind, when I started this series on the first, actually, for the first several episodes, we had a different trend line on the downside. Even though we never came down and close to the downside, I changed this thinking that it's just possible that these two marks over here and this trend here could be more important. I think that this line is important and price action may continue to interact with it in the future. So this is a line that I would keep on my personal chart for any trading and things like that. However, we're going to revert back to the trend line we had before. And what is that trend line that we had before? So the trend line that we had before actually basically is the value long-term important trend line for Tesla stock. So we're talking about from the lows over here connecting the highs over here, and this interacts with price today. So we can see this around here is the trend line that I would be watching. And we can see that we break below it once in a while, like we did here, but there are some interesting in terms of the close right here, in terms of the low on this day. There are some interesting hits that we've been making on basically Tesla's value trend line, and this is the area where I happen to personally like to pick up Tesla shares. So this is the trend that I personally will be watching. If we break below this, then and when that happens, and if that happens, is when I start to be a lot more bearish on the stock. So we'll see what the amplitude is kind of telling us for this move to the downside if we were to move to the downside in the near future. Basically, that's telling us that we go to the price of around, I don't know, 500 and below 570. So we're looking at basically a double bottom from 3.8 that we made over here. Okay, so Palantir stock over here, we have this upward trend line right here, and we have the lower trend line here, and we can see that price is pretty interesting. We have not been breaking out of this at all so far. So that is interesting. We did break below this upward trend line. We thought that this trend line was in fact something that was more significant. And I think that this is showing to be less significant and less relevant. This is also a trend line that I would keep on my charts as it is interacting with price nicely the day before and even today, kind of having the open right on this trend line. So it's a trend line that I'd keep an eye on, but for the moment, it is not the important trend line that I will personally be watching anymore because there is a trend that is forming here. Basically, we're trying to always kind of get a step ahead. We're trying to think of where the trends are actually going to go before the trends actually get there. But now when we see this, I think that the actual important trend that we want to be watching now is also from the top here, just like we had it, but then also it's these top areas that we see over here. So the top from this day and also hitting the tops over here. So something like that. I didn't draw it perfectly, but this is the trend that we will be watching here. Anyway, to the downside, we did not close below our bottom trend line here. Keep in mind that there are a lot of other folks that are a lot more bearish now on Palantir stock because, and for arguably good reason. But however, for me, we did not close below this trend line. So I'm still not super bearish on Palantir quite yet. There's a couple of reasons on a technical perspective, and I'll get into that soon. But I'll talk about the bearish cases that others are presenting. And this is a line that I've shown in the past because it makes it basically a descending triangle. So let's take a look at that real quick. So basically from over here, we make this line. This line basically is interacting with the lows from the candle over here at $20.63. We can see that we dropped down significantly below this. We stayed above it for 2 candles and dropped below this line. There is a significance to this point here. The question is, though, is can we get above it in the next few days? I don't necessarily think we can get above it in one go. And if we do, maybe we gap above this line. I think this line is actually important. Keep in mind what I'm thinking, what other people are thinking, and come to your own conclusion of what's happening. Do we actually break down yet? Are we still trading within this trend? This is the question. We did break below it intraday. However, we broke below this trend intraday a few different times as well. So that's not so surprising. I think that we're still going to be trading within this trend if we open below this trend, or if we break below it and close below this trend. This is when we think we're going to see more downside. The other thing to keep in mind is that this is the significant area that we hit. Basically, this area of consolidation, that is the low of today. So we see that we're getting some support from this area of consolidation. If this area fails, we'd expect to see support at this area of consolidation. So keep those areas in mind as prices going below. So for example, if I want to pick up more shares, maybe I'd pick up some more in this area, and then the next stop in this area, and so on. Having these strategic buys of when I'm allocating capital to a stock. So if I have X amount of capital to allocate to a stock, I'd buy in here and put maybe a third of my capital. Then we get to this area of consolidation, another third, and then another third, and so on. Something like that. As you can see with ARK Invest, they definitely are not buying every single day. They're buying over here, and they bought over here, and they also recently bought right over here. So they're buying strategically as well, and not buying every single day. They're not obviously not buying the tops as well. So keep that in mind and have some sort of strategy of when we're entering a stock and not putting an indefinite amount of money into any given position. Full disclosure, at the lows of the day, not the exact low of the day, I think it was in the $19.50 range, I did significantly purchase more Palantir. I hope you guys got some value from this content. If you haven't already, smash the like button, subscribe to this channel for more content like this, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. And keep in mind that none of this is financial advice. This is just some random guy on YouTube drawing some stick figure lines on a chart talking to you guys.